always believed in helping children. My mom was a teacher and foster parent during my formative years, and I ran across so many situations and children that simply needed help. And so when I thought about who I am and what I want to be, I wanted to be someone who left an impact for those who came behind me. And so I purchased a franchise that is focused on helping kids close learning gaps.
Hey everybody, welcome back to this. I'm your host, Shauna Griffiths, and as always, we've got a real talk with a real leader. Today is one of my favorite people. Today's guest is one of my favorite people. Latrice Bankhead and I have been friends for years. Too many years to say out loud. Latrice, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for making time to join us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah. So folks, this is probably going to sound like just two friends catching up because this is what we do regularly. And we're so glad to be able to do this and share it with you. So folks, Latrice, and I always tell you how I know folks. So Latrice and I worked together back in the day when we were working for Nike. So we were in the communities of WNBA teams. We were representing Nike. We were representing the WNBA athletes that were Nike athletes. I was in Detroit my first year, in Seattle the next year. And I think you were at the Mystics, right?
I started in Cleveland with the Cavaliers, and then the second year I was with the Washington Mystics, and DC.
Okay. Yeah. So not everybody did 2 years, but we did 2 years. It was such an incredible experience. And fast forward, Latrice blows my mind. She is a mom, an author. She is owner of Club Z Tutoring West Sacramento.
Yes.
Folks, I literally think of her as a dream catcher. She lives with such authentic purpose and passion, truly a leader that I admire and have such a great time talking to. So we're going to get into all of this today. But so Latrice, I want to go back to our Nike days because you and I talk about this a lot.
Yeah.
I don't think I realized at the time like how almost like pioneering the effort was. When I think about it, for Nike and women's sports, for the WNBA that was just really getting started.
Yeah.
And for us, for our own careers. And I mean, I think that all of us, we were dropped in these markets and we were just trying to like figure shit out, basically.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think it was an amazing experience because we did have to just, work it out, dig deep within yourself. I think a lot of us came from an athletic background, so I think we were able to kind of use those tools as instrumentals. But yeah, like we went to the city, we had our assignment, we had our Nike contracted athletes we were assigned to, and it was like, okay, go. So I think I learned how to think quick on my feet. And build those relationships.
Mm-hmm.
I think the experience was amazing because we had such access, right?
Yeah.
To our general managers. I mean, in the NBA and WNBA, you're in the front office. You're among, amazing creative people. So I think it was a great jump start to a career. Just learning how to manage different personalities with your athletes as you did your player appearances, but also really the grassroots opportunities in the community. Love that. Yeah. So just being able to build those relationships were key for me. But the biggest thing that I pulled from my experience working with Nike in those cities was the power of networking. The power of asking questions when you're afraid, and not being afraid to get the answer no. It opened so many doors because most people said yes. Yeah. And so I take that into my life today. And, the worst thing that could happen when you enter a room with people who have power and influence, the worst thing they can say is no. So shoot your shot.
It's so true. When I think back to that, even back then with our team of people across the country. I don't remember how many it was. There was probably like 10 or 12
In
of
the
us,
12, yeah.
something like that. But when you really think about it, it was a great, diverse group. We had diversity in our leaders, Felicia Hall Allen, Ray Pond,
Yes.
Ralph Green, again, on and on. We had across the country, the team was so diverse. So I think it was, and men, women, people of
Yes.
color, all of that. So I think it was such a great foundation. Like that was our first experience with a job. That's pretty awesome. And then the amount of autonomy we had in markets, and you really did have to go figure shit out. It was
Yeah.
like,
It was like, go or burn. Like it
yeah,
was no, hand holding. You really
yeah,
had to figure it out. But I think that was really, they trusted us. And
yeah,
that amount of trust gave us the confidence to go out and do a great job. I think we had so many people, not just diversity in age and race and gender, but I mean, backgrounds, such
yeah,
amazing backgrounds and differences that, you got to learn from other people's way of doing things, and then respect the differences in authenticity and how people did things. So I think, I mean, an amazing experience. And then we also had the opportunity to, land our feet on Nike's headquarters, right? And meet some really cool people that were allowed to be their full selves at work,
yeah.
very creative minds. Even Howard White, who lended his time,
I
right,
remember that.
to kind of guide us and share with us even his writing days, his book,
Right.
The Andai Warrior. So, I mean, the experience was amazing. And I look back as, as a benchmark and a comparison, even today in my, my work life experience, like nothing has compared to that start. So I really appreciate having that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I brought it up and like kind of went into it as much as we are because I think people who are listening, whether they're starting out in their journey or they're leading other people, I think these are some of the experiences that we had. I was going to say given, but we worked for those. But I think these are some of the things that really fueled us to that foundation for us as people, as professionals. And I think a lot of times those early experiences that people have they really can shape you.
Yeah.
And the other thing was is when we were it was always the bar was high because of
Mm,
who was in that group. So
yeah.
I always felt inspired, and every call we would have with when everybody came together, it was like, ooh, I wanted to hear what was Latrice doing. I could learn from her and those type of things. So like when you provide that environment for people who are coming up, that next generation, I think it can be just like fuel their fire so much.
I agree. And one of the things I took away from that, Shauna, I think as well, and I think all of us, because I look at our careers now and just kind of how we have all grown into our path, um, is the exposure to the leaders that were responsible for us. So,
Right.
like for instance, Felicia Hall Allen, she was always a mentor, right? Although she had her role, her title, I think she was so humbled in the sense of being someone who could offer a light to someone else, to be their start, to help them figure out their path, to connect them with opportunities. And so that for me, really created something in terms of a model
Yeah.
as a leader myself. Like I want to be like that. I want to be that type of leader. And there's so many leaders that, they forget their purpose. They
Mm,
forget that it's not about them, it's about the people that come behind them. And
right.
she was a great example, I think, that for all of us. And I can see remnants of that in us as leaders
Yeah.
as we've moved forward with our careers, is pulling people with us. And that's one thing that's always stuck with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, again, a lot of times who are people in those leadership seats, they don't make time for
Mm-hmm.
that younger generation. They're not, or they'll sugarcoat things. And I'll tell you what,
Mm-hmm.
Felicia, to this day, I stay in touch with her. She's a founding partner of the podcast.
Yes.
she is such a beacon. And, it was like, I remember that when I was going into the second season and she offered me the opportunity in Seattle, and I waffled on the call about like,
Mhm.
well, I don't know anybody there. And how am I going to get there? And why I don't have a car. And she was like, Shauna, you have 30 minutes to give me an
Figure
answer. And I was like, wait, I got it. And, so like that. And then after my first season, when she told me, Shauna, you have got to learn to be adaptable. And to this day, that is my top
it.
bit of
Mm.
advice. And so that I give to other people when they ask, get asked a lot of times, like, what advice would you give people? I'm telling you what, I don't care where you are in your career, learn to be as adaptable as you can. And, again, like I'm doubling down on this because I think that I talk so much about leadership, and I share stories, and I bring people on who I admire as leaders. And this stuff is really important. Where in your career did that start? What did you experience that shaped you?
Mhm.
And so, I just kind of wanted to talk about it so that people are listening, kind of to cement some of these things, that it is so important where we spend our time, how we interact with people. It makes just a huge, huge impact.
I agree. I agree. And for me, yeah, adaptability has just been part of who I am, right?
Yeah.
I think it comes a lot from just being an athlete. I
Yeah.
remember being an athlete in a male dominated sport. I remember being young as 8 years old, and wanting to play basketball. And the only place I could play was on an outdoor basketball court full of guys,
Yeah.
right? So following behind my big brother of 6 years, my senior. And, the only way I could get on the court is to be able to prove my skills.
Yeah.
So I think, being in uncomfortable spaces has always challenged me to do more, be more, to prove that I can.
Yeah.
And so I think it started there, but also being a point guard. I think being a point guard, you have to learn how to adapt to situations. Things change really quick on the court. And then with you playing basketball, you play for Michigan.
Yeah.
So I think you get the point, but I think it started there, like
Yeah.
learning how to be flexible, learning how to, see holes and adjust on the dime.
Yeah.
As you move through life, I think it's a life skill. I mean, not everything is going to stay stagnant and the same, and not everything is going to be given to you. And so
Mm.
for me, I mean, I took opportunities as it presented itself. I mourned losses and also saw opportunities in those losses.
Yeah.
So it gave me an opportunity to look at things in a different perspective, maybe like pull back layers that I probably wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah.
And then it usually opened up a window that I didn't see coming. And I just climbed through it. And so for me, adaptability was something that I think it came from being in situations that, I was not the predominant uh, person, and then figuring out, my way forward. How can I navigate, my way through to
Exactly.
get to the ultimate goal? And sometimes that goal changes, but
Mm.
just to be flexible enough to accept the circumstances that's there, and then be able to flex.
Yeah, yeah. It's so true. I think of that all like so often about just that mindset. And a lot of times people will say to me that they find me positive.
Hmm.
That they use that term, and I'm air quoting the positivity. And because it's funny because I don't know if I necessarily that doesn't if the word really resonates with me, because it's more of a bit of what you were talking about, where it's like I'm looking for the gap, I'm looking for the hole, because I have to move forward, and
Yes.
there's no other option. It's, again, I too equate it so much to being an athlete and being on the court, and there is no other option than to keep moving forward, to come back to the court every day, to fight, to improve your skills, those type of things. And so again, like I think people perceive, maybe because of my energy or the way that I interact with people or engage, but and maybe I'm a little hype about it, but again, it's just because like it does take that bit inside, that relentlessness.
Yeah.
And again, like I look for that in people who I work with. I look for that in people who are closest in my close circle, um, because there's just, to me, there's no other way to move forward
Mm-hmm.
in this world. And you're so right about, adaptability, because things are going to change, career changes. And it's actually a really good segue, because I would love for you to share with people about your career evolution. So, we were talking and we spent quite a bit of time talking about that. And again, I gave the explanation for why related to leadership and journey, but you've had an incredible evolution in your career. You spent time in the corporate world, and then now in your own world of entrepreneurialism. But I would love for you to share with people that journey of working in corporate America, and how did you get from, those Nike days to where you're at now?
Well, again, like Nike was that cornerstone. Like it gave me insight of what, work could feel like. And going into corporate America, I've worked in corporate America for a large part of my career. I would say I want to date myself, but close to 20 years. And, every experience was different. And it really is largely about the people, right? The people that you encounter in that in your industry, the people, the mindset, the culture of the organization. And largely the culture of the organization really impacts, whether or not it's a good fit for me. And
Yeah.
that's what I had to start to evaluate as I got, further along in my career. Is it really resonating with who I am
Mhm.
as a person, my beliefs, my goals? At the center of my whole career journey, although I started in health promotion and taking care of people, I mean, that was always the cornerstone. That was always the core of what I wanted to do, is to help people. That manifested in health promotion, wellness management for large organizations, industries, etc. Um, and that never changed. But what did was the how, right? And in the corporate America, for me, sometimes you're working with people who are there for the right reasons, people who are there for themselves.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can manifest in stabbing in the back and
Mhm.
being shark like and really just stepping on people to get ahead. And,
Yeah.
for me, climbing that ladder was never really the focus for me. Like, although I want to be compensated for the work that I do like anyone else. But for me, it was more about whether or not I was making an impact, whether or not I was changing, the lives of people that I touch, whether or not I was truly helping people. And for a long time, I felt like I was, because I was helping people take care of themselves with their mental health, their physical health, etc., their emotional health. But along the way, the bottom line starts to take over and greed sets in. And
Yeah.
so in that setting, your your initial goals can get shifted.
Mhm.
And I think toxic cultures and toxic people can really start to um, change, how you feel about not what you do, but
Yeah.
where you do it.
Yeah.
And so for me, my health took a hit during COVID, and it was almost like a gift and a curse. The gift in the sense that it allowed me to really reevaluate, like, what am I doing and why am I doing it? And is this
Mhm.
the legacy I want to leave behind? Are these the people I want to be around? Right.
Right.
As I move forward, the second part of my career. And if I died today as a result of, this health incident, would I be okay with how I live my life?
Mm.
And the answer was no.
Wow.
So it forced me to really open my eyes to see what direction I wanted to go. I could have stayed the corporate route and kept climbing, but at what cost?
Yeah.
And so I was able to reevaluate and really get back to the core of who I am as an authentic individual. And that was, it was always helping people. I always believed in helping children. My mom was a teacher and foster parent during my formative years, and I ran across so many, situations and children that simply needed help. that became part of my family. And so when I thought about who I am and what I want to be, quote unquote, when I grow up, I wanted to be someone who left an impact for those who came behind me.
Got it.
And so I purchased a franchise that is focused on helping kids close learning gaps. I own a tutoring company, and we really just work with families and teachers and students to make sure they're not being left behind. Essentially, since COVID, have so many children have fallen behind, and so we're there to help parents and children pick up those pieces. So I love that. And then another part of that is just, writing children's books, young adult novels, really helping people um, maybe deal with their pain and overcome and empower them with words that heal. So um, those were the two elements that I wanted to grasp as I move forward in my life and my career as a human being, and what legacy I plan to leave behind.
Yeah. So awesome. I have, like, as you're saying it, I couldn't smile bigger. If anybody's listening to this, you're not seeing my face. It's so awesome because you touched on some things that I believe in so much, and that's putting a mirror up to ourselves. And if we can, and you know how many times you'll hear about somebody doing something that might not be so great, it might be
Mm-hmm.
unethical. And I've used the word a lot, and I think a lot of people do, where it's like, how do they look themselves in the mirror every day?
Yes.
And so that's been something that it's not that I think I'm perfect by any means. I use that same technique on myself to like look myself in the mirror and like, am I being true to my core? Am I being true to what I stand for? Am I using my voice? All of those things, because it is really important to me. And so I love that you spoke about that. And I paused to share that, make sure that the audience is hearing that, because I do think that it's really important as we're seeing other authentic leaders doing that. It's great for us to hear that and say, maybe I need to try that. And again, you might be surprised. It might be like, I am so damn proud of the person that I am that's looking back at me. And, but it's something that I do almost daily. Because I have to, that also helps me to check, like if I'm going to just react to something, or, again, it's a way to center myself. So thank you for sharing that. And I also want to point out, you were telling me this story recently about how you got into the Club Z business. And the thing that really stood out to me was that it was a bit of an insight that you took from what was going on in the midst of COVID. And I think that that's really great for us all to hear, because a lot of times we are kind of ping ponging around when something disastrous happens, something, we lose our jobs, and we can go into that very much like reactionary mode. But when
Mm-hmm.
you were telling me the story, is that you actually took that step back to look at yourself, but also to look at the marketplace. And it was like you were saying earlier, actually, I'm connecting the dots to the whole point guard thing.
Yeah.
It was like you
Finding
were the point guard, and you found the white space, you found that gap to be like, ooh, I need to go there and create a solution. And so that lined up with your purpose and your passion. So I just really want to, I guess, applaud that and point it out for those who are listening, because this is where some of the growth comes, and where that next door comes. Sounds to me like you really looked inside for those answers rather than thinking someone else is going to give you that answer.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, like there were opportunities being kind of like thrown my way that was in line with what I've been doing for 20 years, but it didn't resonate with me. But one thing that I did notice, and I think every parent probably can relate to this experience during COVID, is when everything shut down and you were left with just trying to figure it out for your child in terms of their learning, whether that was remote, whether that was in person, whether that was a combination of both. We're talking about differences in resources. I was fortunate. My daughter was in a private school, smaller setting, smaller number of kids, lots of resources. And even then, it was a struggle.
Mm.
I can only imagine what it was like for larger institutions, multiple kids, various economic situations, lack of resources.
Yeah.
What was it like for those children and those families? Um, and I understood what was being lost over multiple years. So you're talking 2 to 3 years of children lacking access to in class learning, um, starting school, kindergarten, first grade on a computer screen where they don't even know their alphabets yet, let alone how to type,
Right.
right? Which results now in what I'm seeing through my business, second graders, third graders, even fourth graders not being able to read,
Yeah.
right? So now how do we manage that, and how are we helping our parents through that? And so I'm I sense that just because my daughter at the time, she's finishing up actually she started her freshman year, the second semester of her freshman year, um, remote because of COVID when things shut down.
Yeah.
But she had a strong foundation leading into that point, and it was a challenge. But we're looking at kids who were just kind of getting started, and kids who may have just hit a stride and things shut down. And so the outcome of that is now here we are 3 years later, and we even have sixth graders reading at the second grade level because they lacked, interventions during that time. And
Yeah.
so I was able to see the writing on the wall. I was able to feel some of that impact, and I knew that there had to be something to help close that gap. And tutoring just spoke to me. I'm good at strategic planning. That's what I was paid to do for many years with my former position. And I'm good with attaching people as with resources. And I saw finding people who were subject matter experts, such
Mhm.
as teachers, counselors, even people who have specialties in mathematics and physics and science, medical doctors who are really passionate about helping children, employing them and making that match with the family so their kids can have the additional support that they need. And so that's what I thrive on. I'm thriving on hearing the feedback from the parent, from the teachers about the milestones that their children are reaching. And so that's kind of, being able to see that whole and then actually seeing the outcomes of that is really rewarding.
It's so awesome. You talking about it, and I'm just like, and it's awesome, folks. So if you look up, we'll put, of course, the links in and everything. But it's so great to see it come to life in your platform, to see the diversity in your tutors, to see the marketing, the way you bring it forward. So it's awesome. I just, again, like applaud what you're doing. I think it's so awesome. And people say live your passion, live your purpose, all of that. And it's so cool to see it in motion when it's actually working and it's having that big impact. And I have to pause and give a shout out to your daughter, who I have
Right.
not met yet, but I cannot wait to meet her. She
Yes.
sounds amazing. All that
Thank
she has
you.
accomplished, going on, finishing school at high school at the top of her class.
Yes.
Um, I'm sure she's so proud to have you as a mom and mentor. So I
Thank
look
you
forward to
so
meeting
much.
her.
Thank you. Yes, she has done an amazing job and forged through the challenges and been very adaptable. So, hats off to her. She has forged through. She's doing really great things. She's top 5% of her class. She has a 4.1 GPA. She's bilingual. She's on the National Honor Society, National Spanish Honor Society. And she's doing great work in the community. Right now, she's doing some type of book drive, collecting books for children who are less fortunate, and then doing story time events and organizing volunteers to go into schools to have a mock book fair to donate the books. So she is doing amazing things. I'm really proud of her. But again, like she's had so much support,
Yeah.
and there's so many children who maybe may not have that same level of support. So
Yeah.
that's why I think it's so important in order for our next generation to thrive, to fill those gaps, to step in where, maybe there isn't the same level of support, but there's always the same level of need.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So getting into the book side of things. So you talked about being an author. So I would love for you to talk a bit more about your books, when or we're going to get our hands and eyes
Yeah.
on things. I can't wait to read what you've got coming out.
Well, you talk about life purpose, and this is the part where, it gets kind of scary. Like you have something resonating in you that won't go away. Like it's
Right.
like this little something in your head that just won't silence. And for me, it was probably a decade ago. I had this idea, this concept about writing some children's books, and it started for me just watching year over year incidents of child abuse that has not really found solutions or healing for those who actually experience it, specifically child sexual abuse. So when I watched like the Sandusky case, or even like um, the, the Larry Nasser case with the gymnastics, I think about all of the people who have to then walk away, pick up the pieces, and be whole, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times I think about what are we doing to prevent this from continuing? Even when you look at, religious institutions, and it happens there where you feel like this is a safe space. Like
Yeah.
my child will be safe here. But what are we really doing to help children, one, recognize when something doesn't feel right, and then how to respond to that?
Yeah.
Who should I tell? And um, and really owning their truth as their superpower. And
Hmm.
so 10 years ago, I wrote these books, and they came very easy for me. Like they just flowed. I felt like I wrote a poem, but it was just really easy. I put it down on paper, and I started the process of publication. But then life happens. Like I got a job opportunity, and it was massive, and it just really was all encompassing, and I had no more headspace
Yeah.
and energy to devote back to that. So it kind of sat on the shelf for about 10 years. But I also wrote a young adult novel that's fantasy fiction, historical fiction. They both take place in like a fairy tale setting for the children's book, but just the young adult novel is more of a magical forest. But that has always just kind of stayed the course over the 10 years in the back of my mind. Like, I need to do this. I need to do this. But the question was always when. There was
Right.
never time. But when I had this opportunity to change directions, I own that sense as part of my purpose,
Mm.
because it never went away. Like this voice never went away. So I started that process of getting that first book published.
Yeah.
I am finishing up my illustrations, and I'm in the process of working with the publishing um, process and getting that done. I am looking to launch the book in July. You will have a sneak peek in June. So I will have some information that will go out to everyone
Awesome.
to kind of get a sneak peek.
Yeah.
You'll get some visuals, and possibly a sneak peek of the read in June. But yeah,
Well, wait. Let me say, please allow me to help with the sneak peek to our audience. They've heard it here, so let us give a
absolutely,
little sneak peek. I can't wait. It's so awesome.
absolutely, I would love that. And I mean, I feel like we read to our children all types of books, right? And I think it's a great way for parents or loved ones to start to have conversations with their children um, about not feeling okay with certain situations. And then if you don't feel okay with a certain situation, what you should do and
Yeah.
who you should tell. And so in my book, it's a fairy tale book that anyone could read. A child who has never experience any form of child abuse, and then those who may have experienced it, who can identify themselves in the characters, who can see that this is what this character did and this hero did, and this is how they felt. And I might feel that way too, but how do they overcome that? And how are they now empowered by that? And if that can happen to them, that can happen to me. And guess what? I can still be okay.
Yeah.
And so that's what this journey is really about, is for kids of all races to see themselves in the characters. Our characters are very diverse in ethnicity and race and background. So my goal was to for children to be able to see themselves and identify with these characters and figure out what to do in these really complex situations.
Yeah. It's so great. I love when the way you're talking about it, because when you said that it could be for kids that haven't had those experiences, the thought came to me of like how much that can help, I want to say, raise someone's level of empathy. Helping, the
Mm-hmm.
more I think we can help raise empathetic children and that next generation, I think the better we all will be, and like, going forward. And obviously, like putting the hands in the putting the tool in the hands of children who have experienced that. I think it's also really interesting, and I shared this with you rather openly, that as you were talking about it, I had some abuse in my childhood, and I was talking to my sister about it recently. It was kind of ironic timing that you were telling me about this, and it was like someone had asked her, why didn't you and your sister talk about it? And so I think there's almost a bit of an ability to have some healing, or maybe it's not healing necessarily, but some understanding.
Yes.
If you're an adult and you're actually can be reading it, because I believe, and this might sound weird to some people, but I believe that there's in a lot of us as adults, there's like a part of us that's still a kid that's like had a certain experience, and maybe we don't necessarily understand what happened with it. And yes, I've been through tons of therapy. However, I do think that sometimes, like to this day, I'm not totally sure why we didn't speak about it. And so, but again, I think there's so much goodness that can come with it from this, whether it's, again, for adults, for kids who have been impacted by it, who haven't. So I love what you're doing. I am absolutely your champion. Can't wait to read it myself and share it with others and share it with the audience. And I also think it's interesting. I want to ask you about, as an author, so many of us, because I have these ideas of, I'll write a book, and thought of it many years. Like, what was holding you back in that? Was it simply, you talked about it being the element of just like not the right time and so much going on? Was it a bit about also just not knowing the next steps, or was there some reservation in communicating your thoughts? And partly I say this because I think there's a lot of people listening who may think about this as well. And so sometimes we're like, why the hell am I not moving forward? So that this might be a good thing for people to hear.
I think it was a combination. I think, of course, timing was everything, because you have to be in the right headspace to have your creative juices kind of release and easily put on a page instead of feeling like you're forcing it. The other part of it is just not knowing what are the next steps, because again, I wasn't trained in this industry. I'm not an English major. It's just funny. I have 3 master's degrees, 4 degrees total, but they were all science related. But I've always had this love of reading and writing that came very easy for me. It was almost therapeutic, cathartic for me to just read and just go into this like separate little safe space, or cheap little journey that I could travel to any world I wanted to. Without having to worry about, a price tag. And I felt like learning, like, what do I do next? But what really taught me, and my hat off to corporate America for teaching me this, is that you don't always have to know the next step. Because even in that setting, you're figuring it out, but you land on the next step, and then you ask the next question. And then you fill that gap until you continue to move forward. And that's what's worked well for me as an author, is you figure it out and you ask the right questions, you get connected with the right people who may have the answer to that question or can help facilitate that. It's
Yes.
no different when you're working with vendors in a corporate environment who have their specialty that lend their service to help move it forward.
Yeah.
So I think for me, if I have any advice to someone who has an idea, don't let that stop you.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of that thing of like just jump and build your wings type thing. It's like just take the next steps forward. And trust me, I'm saying this. I'm looking in the mirror as I'm
Yes,
saying this.
yes,
And you have been a wonderful encourager. To I'm thinking of the last conversation where you gave me a homework assignment, which
yes.
I'm working on
I'm
for my
looking
own
forward to it.
journey. Um, and I'm gonna say this last thing, and then we're gonna start to wrap up. But another thing that I think is really interesting is the most recent step you've taken in your journey in authorship, which I would love for you to share with people because I think it's such an example of that again that dedication, that authentic leadership, and the absence of ego, which I think is so key to truly being able to be that authentic leader where you're not letting any of that nonsense like get in the way. So can you talk about what you've been doing in the book author space?
Yes. And, ego can really trip you up. And that's why I don't entertain it. Because I think it really gets in the way of growth, like
Yeah.
the opportunity to learn from other people. You could be the smartest person in a particular area, but there's so many other areas that I'm clueless about, right? And I feel like there's so much space to be a lifelong learner. Um, is to just being open and to being raw and humbling yourself to learning things. And so being an author is a passion that I respect, but also just being in spaces where people have done it for years and really have been successful is interesting to me. So, as my lifelong dream, I want to eventually own a coffee shop bookstore somewhere, somehow. But in the meantime, I feel like I already do because I spend my time now a few times a week working in an awesome bookstore. It's an independent bookstore called Underground Books. It is in a historic neighborhood. It's been around for about almost 30 years. Amazing people who own it from the community. And I'm learning so much. I'm learning about how authors even get into bookstores. I'm learning how books are ordered and how independent authors actually find their way on the shelf. I'm learning about author signings. Like this bookstore has author signings once a month. I'm learning about, how that process actually works and getting the experience of meeting such dynamic artists and local authors as well. So I think it's not just an opportunity for me to be in a space, but to learn like all the aspects of writing and entrepreneurship, as well as what is it truly like to be on the shelf and get into a bookstore and in that environment. I'm also getting the chance to see other authors' works
Oh yeah, yeah.
and children authors and genres and maybe different types of publications. So to be in that space for me is an honor. Like
Mm.
when I say that I look forward to going each day, I mean, it's something I wake up and I'm excited about. And I haven't said that in a long time about, working in a space, but, the
Yeah.
type of people, the creatives, artists that come in, learning about the process, the marketing, the promotion, all the pieces that you never think about when you walk into a bookstore, but there's a lot going on in a bookstore that you wouldn't necessarily see at face value. So I appreciate, being able to learn all of it, being a part of it. We're doing story time events once a month where children come in, they can sit and they read. A story is read to them, and they get to walk home with a new book.
Mm.
Just being able to engage with those type of people, encourage young readers, it's an awesome experience. And I don't think you could put a title on that
Yeah.
and a salary that would compare.
Uh,
So that's how I plan to spend my time, just being very intentional with what I'm doing, how it's impacting those around me, and how I can grow from it.
yeah, yeah. It's such a great story, and it definitely had my wheels kind of spinning. And so, folks, I'm sure as you can now see and hear, why I just gravitate toward Latrice and why I just admire her, and
Aw,
am so count you, Latrice, as one of my greatest friends. And
absolutely.
you are such a shining example of authenticity, of leadership. So thank you for all you're doing and impact. And it's awesome and it's needed. And so before I let you go, we've covered so much, from Nike in the community to bookstores to your daughter, to the whole gamut. So if there's one or two things that you hope that people take away from your episode, what
Mm.
would that be?
I honestly would say, and this is why I am so thankful to have you, Shauna, in my life, is, I would encourage people to be their authentic selves. Like, that's one thing that I've always appreciated about you. You have always been a unique spirit, forged your own path, done things your way, put your spin on it. And I think the world is better for it. And I think if we have people who are brave enough to embrace who they are and show up in their full selves and let the world around them adjust to
Yeah.
their greatness, I think we will have such an interesting world, full of more impactful experiences, opposed to the cookie cutter experience of fit in a box. As I always say, color outside the lines, be your full self. So if I could encourage anyone in whatever career path you're in, entrepreneurship or in a corporate setting, don't fit in a box. Be your full self. Let yourself shine. The world will be a better place for it.
Oh, that is awesome. And you are doing that. You are, like I said, you're a shining example of it. So everybody, I'm going to let you go. I will be following up with you with all this great stuff about Latrice. Everybody have a great day. Latrice, have an awesome day, lady. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.